Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. This particular video will be for the historic best of one format. So we're going to be looking at and seeing what the top decks are. We're getting the data from Untapped.gg, what you see on the screen. It is a companion tool that runs alongside your Arena client. It tracks win rate data for a bunch of users. You can get started with the link in the video so you can track your win rates as well. And like I said, this is for historic best of one. If you're looking for, we'll try to get the best of three, but data for best of three historics usually a little hit or miss. We've already done standard best of one. If you're looking for best of three, the Explorer content I'll do later in the week because it is the Explorer metagame challenge this upcoming weekend. So we'll cover it for that as well. But we come out with this every week. So if you like to keep on top of what's the newest decks, the hottest decks, the best performing decks, especially when new sets drop, the new March of the Machine set is coming up in 2 weeks, so make sure to subscribe. You get all the content here. We are trying to hit 10,000 subs on the channel. We broke 8,000 last week, and we're continuing to push. The goal is to hit 10,000 by June. So if you haven't subbed already, it's free. It's easy. Helps out the channel. And just another quick programming note. For the month of April, every penny I make from YouTube, all the revenue that I make, I am donating it to a Toronto-based food bank where I live. So I am giving it all back, hoping to generate hundreds of dollars of donations. So if you do want to just watch some of my videos, just keep them running in the background while you're doing stuff, just helps generate more money that I could donate. I have a goal of about $500 that I want to donate to help out those that are less fortunate or just hungry in the city. Times are tough for everyone, so trying to do that. So we're going to jump into it. It is March 27th through April 3rd. April Fools is behind us, and we're going to look Diamond to Mythic rank. Reason for this is because the ladder switched over this month with the end of the month. So some of the folks that were in Mythic rank started off the last couple days in Platinum. So we want to kind of capture that as part of the overall kind of stats. So we have 19,000 games, and I'm going to just start off. We got a sweet one to start off with. 68% win rate, Sultai Dredge. So Dredge is an older format. It's an older mechanic. It is kind of based off like Life of the Loam and a lot of kind of self-mill enabling cards. It's a modern deck. It's a vintage deck. I don't know if it's a legacy deck. Bazaar of Baghdad helps in the Eternal formats. But with Shadows over Innistrad, we got a couple of cards to help enable this strategy. So 68%, 100 matches. So just in the cusp of coming up as stats. So the core of this deck is you self-mill yourself. You want to mill yourself, put stuff into the graveyard to get value. The card that you're kind of was introduced that's giving us that value is Prized Amalgam. So it's a 3-mana 3/3. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, if it entered from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, you return Prized Amalgam from your graveyard to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. So beginning of next end step is important because if you have something enter the battlefield at your end step, it sees it afterwards, so then it comes in at your opponent's end step. So kind of a timing thing. So the ways we can get things to cheat into our from our graveyard to our battlefield, we have Silver Smoke Ghoul. If we gain 3 or more life, it comes back from the graveyard. Creeping Chill, if we mill it over, we get to play it or exile it and gets to do 3 damage that way there. So it's kind of a cool way that you flip it over, you deal 3 to your opponent. It's basically Lightning Helix to your opponent's face. Your Silver Smoke Ghoul comes back, Prize Amalgam comes back as well. If we mill over Necromoeba, it also comes into play, which would also trigger the Prize Amalgam. We have Satyr Wayfinder to fill our graveyard, Stitcher Supplier to fill our graveyard, Founding of the Third Path to fill our graveyard, Glimpse the Unthinkable, 10 cards into our graveyard. Grizzly Salvage, 10 cards, or 5 cards into our graveyard. So lots of ways to kind of find lands, but also self-mill. Also the card Collective Brutality from Shadows over Innistrad. So 2 mana, and then it has the ability Escalate. So you can discard a card and choose 1 or more. So you can escalate, and then, so if you have cards in your hand that you want in your graveyard, that's one way to put it in. So target opponent reveals their hand. You basically kind of pseudo-duress them, instant or sorcery. A creature gets -2/2, or target player loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. Unfortunately, it's just shy of being enough to hit the Silver Smoke. We want 3 life, but it is something there. We also have Hunted Dead. from Shadows. So 4 mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you get to create a 1/1 spirit creature token with flying. And then for 2 mana, you could discard 2 cards, return Haunted Dead from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So it's another way you can do this at instant speed as well. One of the things, the cards that is being played here is Driven Despair. So just have it up here. I don't know how I feel about this card. I honestly probably will get to the sec, but I probably would just play a second Haunted Dead. I don't see really what value this is providing. So if you cast it from your hand until the end of turn, so how these cards work is the top portion you cast from your hand, the Aftermath ability you cast it from your graveyard. So Driven Despair, it says basically the driven part, if you cast the green component, creatures you control, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. You're not really looking to draw cards in this deck, you want to mill cards more. And then the Despair part is until end of turn, creatures you control gain menace, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card. So another effect where it's just, I don't know how much we want to kind of play that. Like in certain matchups to get him to discard their hand, but best of one is usually you're kind of hitting over your full graveyard. So kind of an interesting shell there. Things you can do is like Mana Confluence if you want, and then play Lingering Souls, since it has the flashback as well. Get you some spirits that way there, some value in that respect. So there's kind of like a couple different options that you can play. But I'm interested to try this deck out, see how it plays out, all things considered. So then we move on. So there's kind of 2 Esper Affinity decks. They're really Azorius. They call them Esper because you have Vault Scourge. This is a little bit more of a budget version that's actually got a pretty good win rate this week. And then we'll also look at the classic Azorius deck. This one's a 63% win rate, bigger sample size. But this version, I will say off the bat, mana base probably can use a little lovin'. You want your Hallowed Fountain, so we'll definitely kind of build the mana base off the other version. I'll include both of these. This version is not on the Retrofitter Foundry, so a lot of these decks are built around Retrofitter Foundry. Plays very well with the Ornithopters, the last ability, Sacrifice a Thopter, create a 4/4 colorless token, and it's kind of a grind effect. So that's kind of the common one you see in these artifact decks. This one's more of an affinity aggro deck, so a lot more aggressive. So you have your Ornithopters, Esper Sentinels, Gingerbrute, which could be unblockable. And then you have access to Ensoul Artifact that gives creature base power and toughness 5/5. So you can enchant like your Ornithopters, anything like that. You can also do your Darksteel Citadels to make them indestructible. You have your Mashikos to pump up power as well. This version's also playing Surge Engine, which can be unblockable in addition to the Gingerbrute. All that glitters. So this one's really just like, here's a threat, I'm going to make it stupid big and smash into your opponent's face. You have the Mycosynth Gardens, which becomes a copy of a non-token artifact you control. I think the mana base could largely be improved on this one, but if you're looking for a little bit more of an aggressively slanted version, you just want to make big dumb creatures, this version seems pretty sweet. And then kind of looking at the traditional, I would just mirror the mana base off this one here, all things considered. So very similar, you have your Ensoul Artifacts, your Mashikos. This version's playing Ingenious Smith to help you find your cheaper artifacts, kind of mixed into there. And then a bunch of pump effects, stuff like that. And then you have Innovative Metatech. The Metatech lets you seek cards. So how seek works, it's similar to draw, but it just randomly pulls a card from your library with mana value 2 or less. And it's notably non-land for this card. So you always kind of get action out of this deck. You have 6 Thopters, Hopagira is a Thopter as well, that you're able to use the Retrofitter Foundry to cheat into a 4/4. From there, we go to Boros Burn, 65% win rate. So Boros Burn would be kind of in between these, but I wanted to kind of highlight the 2 Esper or the Azorius Affinity decks together. This is a burn-based aggressive deck, so a lot of cheap spells here. You have Dragon Rage Chandler, kind of mill over cards. Very easy to get Delirium in this deck between instant sorceries, creatures, lands, and enchantments. Cards like Eidolon of the Great Revel is an enchantment and a creature, so it counts as 2 types here. Similarly, Kumano is an enchantment, being a saga. So you have your Dragon Rage Chandler, Monastery Swiftspear with Prowess, and then the Eidolon of the Great Revels. The Eidolon here lets you, or it's a symmetrical effect. where whenever a player casts 3 CMC or less card, it deals 2 damage to them. So what you're doing is pinging your opponent repeatedly, kind of in a way. You get that value, and then the way you offset it is having lightning helix, because you could gain 3 life, so it helps you in terms of the race. So you're trying to put on burn damage, get your opponent to a spot where they can't really recover and cast spells. In terms of burn, lightning helix, 3 damage, 3 life, static discharge. Each time you cast it, you tack on an extra point of damage. Play with fire as burn, skewer the critics as burn. That could be as cheap as 1 mana. Risk factor as a way to draw some cards or deal 4 damage. You can also discard cards, which is nice. Similarly with Dragon Rage Chandler, you could put it into your graveyard and then use the Jumpstart to cast it from your graveyard. Light Up Stage as another way to get some card advantage. Some utility lands in Den of the Bugbear, and then Ramanap Ruins. We then go to Selesnya Hammer. So this is Hammer time. This one is 63% win rate. So this is looking to use kind of 2 equipments. So you have the Colossal Hammer. So 1 mana, target creature gets plus 10/10 and loses flying. Normally the equip cost is 8, but this deck is all about cheating the equipped cost. So you have that, and then you have the Belted Giant Strength, base power 10/10, and it costs 1 less. So it costs 10, but 1 less for the power of the creature. The way we get around that is by either using Kemba's Outfitter to change the equip cost to 1 of either the equipments. You also have Sigarda's Aid, which your equipments have flash, and then whenever an equipment enters the battlefield, you can attach to target creature. So it could be used as a combat trick, auto-equipped as well. You also have a Kemba that when it enters battlefield, you get to equip an equipment to a cat. So it's a cat, Kemba's a cat, kind of nice in there. You have some protection spells, in like Selfless Savior, Skrelv, Springle-Leaf Drum for ramp. The Skrelv gives you hexproof, this gives you indestructible. Shadow Sphere as another equipment gives you lifelink trample, so you have a really big creature, but this gives you the trample needed. And then Mana Tithe as a counter spell, Ginger Brute as an unblockable creature if your opponent doesn't have anything with haste. And then Ingenious Smith helps you find your other artifacts, and then gives you just gets bigger every time you cast an artifact as well. From there, 5-color Reanimator, 56% win rate. So this is a not so much self-mill in this, like the traditional sense of like, okay, we're just putting stuff into our graveyard. It's self-mill in the context of I want to put strategically cards into the graveyard. And ideally what you want to do is put an Atraxa Grand Unifier in the graveyard, and as early as turn 3 through a combination of Priest of the Fell Rites on turn 2, Blood Tithe Harvester with the blood token, discard the Atraxa, or with Thought Seizing yourself, discard the Atraxa. You could reanimate with Priest of the Fell Rites. Crucius helps you find the Atraxa. Fable lets you bin it. You also have Unburial Rites as a way from either your main board or your graveyard to reanimate creatures as well. So it gives you some value in that respect. The rest of the deck is just some discard spells, some removal, and Fatal Push, as well as Fragment Reality. And then kind of a cool card. And this is something that actually, now that I see it, the Sultai Dredge list would be kind of cool to have this in. So it's Phyrexian Scrapyard. So for a mana, and you could tap. So 1 in this tap, you get to discard a card, and you get to conjure another copy of this land to your hand. And then you can sacrifice 3 copies of the land, and then you get Solanu Phyrexia, which is a 6/6 colorless creature, into the battlefield for free. So this is another way to kind of bin stuff into your graveyard that you don't want in your hand, which is kind of interesting. And then lastly, so this is the list I was trying out. I'll have the video up on stream. It shows 5-3 record. I should have been 6-2. I punted a game where I just clicked the wrong card and I just snowballed. Like basically, instead of killing their creature at the time and being so far ahead in the game, I played the wrong spell. But it felt a lot better than what it actually kind of yielded the results. So it's Izzet Wizards, but kind of a little bit of a switch. I was playing 2 copies of Snapcaster Mage, 4 copies of Piece It Together. And it was really easy just with this 1 mana spell to take an extra turn. So it's still like your Izzet Burn deck, your Dreadhorde Arcanist, the flashback stuff from the graveyard, Play with Fire, stuff like that, Soulscar Mage. But you also get access to like an extra turn spell for 1 mana. you're kind of cutting down on the number of 2-mana draw spells, and instead just a lot more like cheap interaction, Fading Hope, Consider, Piece Together, stuff of that nature. So this deck felt pretty solid, all things considered. Like I said, we only played 8 games. 6-2 should have been the record, ended up 5-3, but I'll have the gameplay up with that video as well. I'll try to have them released at the same time if you want to see how that one performed as well. So I'm going to wrap it up for the week. As always, if you do enjoy the content, like I said, like, comment, subscribe, all free and easy ways to help out the channel. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one and stay safe out there.